Hey guys, Mr. Nakami here again. Continuing off with lesson 2 of unit 6, confidence intervals for the mean using small samples, right? Last time we left off on how to calculate a t critical this time instead of a z critical, right? If your sample size is less than 30, we have to use an approximation and we can't use the z score anymore. We have to use this t table instead, right? And hopefully you guys were able to find the t table. It should look something like this, right? Where we have our confidence level right here that we're going to be looking at. The set levels, by the way. And then with that, we're also going to have to find our degrees freedom, right? Our degrees freedom is simply just for your sample size minus 1, right? And that will help us find our degrees of freedom. Okay? Using the chart, we're able to find this t critical, and now we're going to apply that t critical today into this equation that hopefully looks familiar to you, right? This equation right here. This will help us to calculate the confidence interval for the population mean, right? The population mean mu is something we don't know what it is, but we can figure out that it's going to be between the sample mean plus the margin of error and the sample mean minus the margin of error, right? And the margin of error is simply going to be calculated using this equation right here, which is very similar to our margin of error equation for our z table, right? The only thing that's changed now, instead of z sub c, is now t sub c. And we don't have the standard deviation for the population. We can use the sample standard deviation instead, and our sample size is still the same there. So I'm going to go ahead and write this equation down over here just to help me reference to it. Our margin of error is going to be equal to t sub c times the standard deviation all over the square root of n, right? So let's go ahead and get into this problem right here. The owner of Starbucks randomly selects 16 coffee shops and measures the temperature of the coffee sold at each of those stores. He knows that the sample mean temperature should be 162.0 degrees Fahrenheit with a sample standard deviation of 10.0 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so we got the mean here and we got the standard deviation. Find the 95% confidence interval of the mean temperature to guarantee a Starbucks customer the temperature of coffee sold to them. Assume the temperatures are approximately normally distributed. There's a lot, sounds like there's a lot going on here, right? But we're going to just take it piece by piece and we'll be able to figure this out. Okay? So first things first, I noticed that the mean is given to us, and this is the sample mean, meaning that it's x bar, not mu, and x bar is 162.0 Fahrenheit with a standard deviation of the sample, by the way. It doesn't say it's the population standard deviation. It's the sample mean with a sample standard deviation, which is going to be S in this case. And S in this case is going to be 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Next thing that they tell us is that we're looking for a 95% confidence level, or confidence interval. So that's 0.95 for my C. And I'm looking at a random sample of 16. Excuse me. So n in this case is equal to 16. So my sample size is less than 30, right? It means that I'm going to have to use a t critical this time for my margin of error. But I kind of know that because this is the example that I'm doing for this problem right here, right? So now, since I know that, I'm also going to need the degrees of freedom. And the degrees of freedom, remember, is just your sample size, in this case 16, minus 1. So my degrees freedom is just equal to 15. Okay? With that, with my confidence level of 95% and my degrees freedom of 15, I can go to my table and find out, let's see here, 95%, which is right here, confidence level, and my degrees freedom was 15, so it's just going across this way. So my T critical is going to be 2.131. 2.131. Let's write that down here. Back over my notes, my T critical is 2.131. So I have my T critical, I have my sample standard deviation, I have my n now. This is enough information for me to calculate my margin of error. Okay? So that's the first thing I'm going to do. My margin of error is going to be equal to t critical, which is 2.131 times the standard deviation of the sample, which is 10, divided by the square root of the sample size of 16. All right, we're going to go ahead and plug this into our calculator. I don't have my emulator ready for this, so let me open that up real quick. And it's going to come out to 5.3275. Hopefully I did that right. And just to make our lives a little bit easier, I'm going to round that to about 5.3, since they're rounding it to, since they're rounding the problem here to 0.0 to the first decimal place. Okay, now that I have my margin of error, that is not the end of the problem though, right? They're asking for the confidence interval, and the confidence interval takes the margin of error and adds it to our sample mean and subtracts it to our sample mean, and the one that subtract will be on the bottom and the one that adds will be on the top. So my confidence interval is going to be very simple. It's going to be 162, right, minus 5.3, and the other one's going to be, and this is going to be above that value, and then below 162 plus 5.3, and that's all I got to do, right? Do that calculation. 162 minus 5.3 is going to be 156.7 is my lower bound, and my upper bound is going to be 162 plus 5.3, which is going to be 167.3. And that's it. That's my confidence interval. Okay? And that's pretty much it when you're working on this problem. It's just like the last section, right? Except now our sample size is just a little bit smaller, which means that we have to use a different table. So for today's exit question, you're going to be given the same setup, except, 16 coffee shops, average temperature at the same standard deviation, except instead of calculating a 95% confidence interval, I'm going to have you do two of these. I'm going to have you do one for a 90% confidence interval. So I want you to do the same thing as I did up here, but I'm changing now my confidence interval, confidence level from 95 to 90%. And then I want you to do it again for a confidence level of 99%. Okay? So once you guys get that done, I want you to submit the upper bound and the lower bound for me. And that'll be it for today. All right? Hopefully you guys are doing all right. And I'll see you guys in the next video. So long.